stop time. We'll go back into session. Just want to thank y'all, especially those out in the audience, for coming for our first transportation meeting of this year. We appreciate it. Thank you, members. You know, to start out, where's Connor at? Connor, stand up. Yeah, stand up. I'll tell you what. All of you in this room, I want you to know, last night we had the state of transportation at Connor's headquarters. It was fabulous. I mean, oh yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, just, you know, and it was fabulous, Connor. And we just want to recognize you. I mean, you had to do a lot of work to open that building up, to let all the people from all over Georgia come. And I just want to tell you thank you. And thank you for letting me take a tour of your operations center. It's incredible, the work that Norfolk Southern does there. And I sure appreciate it. But committee,
you know how
yes.
nice it was?
How nice was it?
I saw Craig Camuso leave his employee application.
But it was a joint effort. I did see the gentleman there, you know, from both sides. But it was great. I know a number of y'all were there, and a lot of our members were there, but wow. And it's a great time for us to take time to thank a lot of the people who've helped us throughout the year and be a part of transportation. You know, I just really enjoyed it. First on staff, you know, we've changed a little bit this year. Of course, thank the Lord, Abby Day.
Couldn't dynamite me out.
Couldn't dynamite you out. That's what we all wanted to hear. You know, has so many hats in the House Budget Research Office, but you know, one of them she does is transportation and the budget with Chairman Perkle. And you know, I know y'all know we can't do it without her. I mean, it's just great, her depth of knowledge. Our new admin, she was here a minute ago. Carmen Champion is in our office now. Look, you'll enjoy meeting. She was here a moment ago. Come by and meet her. It's been a great addition. Learned a lot in 2 weeks about how we like to do stuff. And, you know, we've had to untrain her on a couple things. But from her previous plate, and I was just teasing her, but it's done great. Now, Jackson, stand up, Jackson. This gentleman is our intern this year. And those y'all have been around me know I've had the best luck with interns. And Jackson is right in that groove of somebody that's really interested in transportation. We took him to the highway contractors board meeting yesterday with David, and we had lots of questions on the way home about that. And so Jackson's a UGA. He's going to be a senior, political science from Noonan. And Jackson, we just appreciate you being so helpful. Been jumped right in there. Now, and just think, y'all, as we get started, think about Vance. You know, he hurt his foot, and be thinking about him. But I'll just start us off with just a prayer, if you don't mind. Heavenly Father, thank you for letting us be together and be a part of this fabulous world of transportation and the work we do here. And we know the good we try to do for Georgians every day. And please bless these committee members and all the different things we do every day and the people we touch. Help keep us healthy, help keep us safe in our travels to and from home. In your name, amen.
Amen.
You know, I'll just start off just with a point of I don't know what's called, personal privilege. Thank you, Abby. I think all of y'all the other day when you saw the budget were shocked, thankful, a number of different words about the dollars that were put into the budget for transportation. You know, 1.54 billion or so is incredible. 20% of the surplus that's out there just for transportation is the world that you guys work in, the world that have the opportunity to work in. And I want to thank the governor, and I also want to thank a lot of y'all who have, when we met in July, in August, September, October, all these times, making the case for the increased funding, to fill in, to do what we needed to do in transportation, to right the ship. And it's a great statement from the administrative side and our side of how important transportation is to our state. And I do want to tell you, if you have a time, many of y'all know the governor personally and professionally, take a moment and just tell him thank you. Just send him a note, text him if you'd like to, but I mean, you know, we're competing for dollars with everyone, and transportation really hit a home run this past year. And so I really thank Governor Kemp and his team for doing that. But I think members, we all know that's what he's done. So first up, I want to have David Mollering. I want David to come up because we've got a gift for you committee members. And I want David to just talk a little about the Georgia Highway Contractors and a new car. I'll have to tell you about the joke I pulled on Mike Chokas someday. But Jackson, stand up. I'll show him one of these members.
Stand up.
And take it up there to Mr. Mollering, you know, take one up there to him. And, you know, he and I talked about this at one point, thought it'd be kind of fun to have something special for the committee. And Mr. Mollering,
Sure.
it's yours.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I want to tell you thank you for the work that all of you all do on behalf of transportation. You mentioned the team that does focus on this, and we're very fortunate to have the department that we do, the commissioner and his staff, and the way that they deliver the program and the projects that keep all of us moving. So we're very thankful for this entire team. Yeah, you and I were sitting around kind of chatting about things we could do, and this was actually the chairman's idea, but he wanted something to be able to give to you all. And of course, we said it had to be orange because of barrels and pylons and things. So it's our pleasure just to give you this cup just as a commemoration of you all serving on this committee, and our appreciation to you all for the work that you do. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, David. It's just showing up. It's got their logo and transportation on it. You know, at the end of the meeting, Jackson will have them. It's got your name on one. It's a nicer orange than Tennessee orange, y'all.
That's right. That's
Just
right.
had a hard time with the Tennessee orange one, but yeah, it's a little ridiculous. You know? Well, you know, if it was up to me, but you know, we played off the orange cones. We were laughing about it one day, and that's why we did that. But thank you, David.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And your group.
Appreciate it.
Commissioner, you want to be at the podium or down here, or you got Josh ready? You know, we have a great team. You know, I guess over the few years that I've had the opportunity to do this, I certainly want to recognize transportation has a great team in all the different facets that it's in. And we've got a great leader. And Russell, how long have you been in commissioner's job?
January 2015, if you're counting.
January 2015.
If you're counting.
So I want to make sure y'all know that. And what'd you do before then?
Chief engineer for about 5 years.
Okay. Knows where the bridges are all over northeast Georgia, don't you?
Yes,
And
sir.
roads and all sorts of stuff. You know, members, I hope you get to know our commissioner. We've had just a great time getting to know each other and work together. And, you know, I can't not brag about Josh Waller, who's I send you to all the time. But what I thought was real important for Russell to talk about the budget, what it's in there, because I want you to go home this weekend on your social media and talk about transportation and the budget and what's going on. I think it's very important that our communities know what's going on, and you take credit for what's going to happen. So I ask the commissioner to come talk about it, and the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's always good to be before my favorite committee that I'm sitting at the moment. But that is transportation, whether it be House or Senate, and appropriations, as I might add, too. But so my favorite committee. So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to sort of highlight just the amended year 24, because as you've talked about the historical and the wonderful news, I consider it wonderful news, and are very thankful and grateful for what the governor put into the budget for transportation. It was reflected in the amended 24 budget. So I'm going to take a moment to sort of do a little deeper dive into the budget than I did at joint appropriations, and then highlight several of the questions that I have gotten or we've talked about through the Appropriations Committee or Joint Appropriations Committee, just to bring to your attention and acknowledgement. And of course, Mr. Chairman, you've heard this before. Abby Day has heard it before, so she probably could give it, but I'll do my best. So Josh is going to click along on this slide, I just remind everybody that transportation funding is derived from four main sources. Of course, motor fuel being the first in dedication there of funding to the GDOT budget. We also have, when you look at our budget, you'll see the Transportation Trust Fund, which consists of really three things. It consists of the alternative vehicle fee, the annual heavy vehicle fee, and the hotel fee. And so that constitutes the Transportation Trust Fund. And then uniquely, the rideshare fees, that from Uber, Lyft, or a car service or a taxi, goes into the Transit Trust Fund, and I'll take a deeper dive into what those dollars are used for in the budget. And last, and it's usually least, but not in this year's budget, is state general funds, where the surplus dollars the governor so fortunately put into the budget. Those are basically state general funds. So just as whenever you look at our budget, you're going to see these four different revenue sources that go to our budget. Okay, next slide. This is a little bit of a deep slide to look at, but let me share this information with you from the National Highway Construction Cost Index, which is the red line on the chart. And this chart goes back into 2020 and goes into the second quarter, first or second quarter there of 2023. And what the National Highway Construction Cost Index is again an index of the cost of doing construction nationally. This chart is from the Federal Highway Administration. It looks at things like the cost of doing business, like steel cost, aggregate cost, concrete cost, asphalt cost, the major components of construction projects on a national basis. They sort of baseline way back a few years ago, back before 2020, and then they look at the rise and fall of what the cost of doing business is on construction, highway construction type projects. That is the red line. Now, what's pretty neat about this chart is in comparison to other indexes that we're familiar with. Of course, CPI is the index, the Consumer Price Index everybody's familiar with. We generally think about CPI as it relates to, hey, what are we paying for things, and what's our cost as individuals at home. The green dashed line is the Power Producer Index, and that's exactly what that is. It's the cost of energy to produce and to deliver energy. That's that green line that sort of, you saw, was outpacing everything. And as you recall, from everything from petroleum to electricity and everything in between, it takes energy to generate and manufacture goods and turn the heat on and everything else. The yellow dash line that's sort of faint at the bottom is the Employment Cost Index. Again, an index that tracks employment and cost of employment. So what the takeaway from this very complex slide is the relativity of each of these indexes and how the National Highway Construction Cost Index is outpacing for a long time now, going back into 2021, has outpaced even CPI. So what does that mean? It means highway construction projects, transportation projects just cost more than what the cost of general inflation has been. In fact, when you go back to Q2 of 2020 and go to about Q2 of 2023, nationally you've seen about a 51% increase in the construction cost. So just think about that. So about 51% increase generally. And so that's the point of this slide, to sort of set this at the national level. On the next slide, I just want to take a moment to share with you, again, why this additional revenue recognized during our budget is so important so that we can continue to deliver, as the chairman talked about us delivering. This is Georgia Asphalt Resurfacing Project cost going back to December 2020. And if you look at the blue line is the one you need to pay attention to. That is where we actually received and awarded bids for resurfacing. And I draw your attention to this slide that this is a cost per mile per 1 12-foot lane. So this is not a 2-lane road cost. This is just 1 lane 12 feet wide for 1 mile, which you can see is coming in right around $150,000 a mile for 1 lane. So 2 lanes for 2-lane roads, 300,000 roughly a mile. It actually is a little bit higher than that on average now. But that's an 80% increase in the cost of doing business going back to December 2020, which tracks very similar to that previous chart I just showed you. The other way I look at $300,000 a mile, that's almost $60 a foot for a 2-lane road. If you want to lay down 320s every foot, that's about what it's costing. So that's what this represents. And this is exclusive of interstate resurfacing costs, which are more for various reasons, including the type of asphalt and the complexity and the traffic and everything you got to deal with. So just a data point there. The next data point is really one that gets your attention. And this is the cost per mile to widen a 2-lane road to a 4-lane road in an urban area. And so we had 18 projects that total over $550 million going back to 2020. We've seen a 118% increase in that cost of widening a 2-lane road to a 4-lane road. And the little blue dot is sitting at $19 million a mile to widen a 2-lane road to a 4-lane road in an urban area. And we've actually, again, this is on average. We've had project costs exceed that on a per mile basis in several locations. And in an urban area as well, it's often that the right-of-way cost may be similar to, if not greater than, the cost to widen the road itself. So you can easily say, you know, you're going to be somewhere around 30 to even $40 million a mile for right-of-way and or construction.
Commissioner, can I just interrupt a second?
Absolutely.
I think members, I want to make sure when you're looking across this graph, that you understand that these projects are bid out at a regular interval. And I think in transportation, it's just so because it's going to become important down the road in a discussion we'll be having very soon. But you look at the dates are similar: December, June, and so can you just expound on that bid process and how you do that, Commissioner?
Yes, absolutely. So every month, our state transportation board by law has to approve the projects to be advertised for competitive low bid. And so as David Mullering and his members of GHCA, they every month take plans, review the plans, and then will submit a bid on usually the third Friday of the third Friday after the third Thursday of every month. And that's a tongue twister, and so they are looking at these projects as competitively bid, and we take the lowest responsible bid, meaning that everything looks good. There's nothing wrong with it, which is generally never the issue. And so then we do that on a monthly basis. So we're bidding projects on a monthly basis. And then we review them. It goes through 2 rounds of review, internal review. This one red line I did not talk about is called the engineer's estimate. And we have a small group of engineers. That's all they do is they're estimating cost to make sure that the price that is being bid is one that we agree with and can accept. And so that's a process that goes through there. Our engineers reach out and call manufacturers of materials and suppliers just like the contractors do and get real-time quotes and pricing. So it's really important that we know that when we award a project that it is a very good responsive bid based on market conditions at the time. So, but yes, sir. Hopefully, yeah. And we do that on a monthly basis. It's Georgia. With our weather, we do it on a monthly basis. Some other states in the Northeast only bid stuff in the spring and the summer when they can actually do work, but we do bids year-round. Okay, I'm going to flip over to, we talked about resurfacing, we talk about widening. Now just talk a little bit about bridges. So bridges are always important here in Georgia. And this is data reflecting bridges. And when I take this data is only the cost of a square foot of a bridge. You think about the bridge deck, the parts you ride on. You think about a house, when you price a house, you price it on a per square foot basis. So this is cost for the bridge only. So the roadway, the approaches, the guardrail, the dirt, everything that it takes to lead up to the bridge is excluded from this. we're just really looking at what does it cost to build a bridge in Georgia. A 61% increase in cost as you look back to the year 2020. We have a lot of good bid data here. The average bridge cost is $5.2 million going back to 2020 to 2023. When we average those all out, that turned into about $5.2 million per bridge. So just to give you some basis. Again, sort of the reason I'm telling you this is setting the table of why this additional revenue recognized in our budget is so desperately critical to us moving forward. I don't have a slide for this, but everybody loves a roundabout. I'm making sure everybody's nodding. I get some smiles and some nods, okay. So they're growing. I heard somebody say they're growing. We're growing lots of roundabouts from a safety point of view. Roundabout costs have increased by about 114%. Average roundabout is about $3.2 million now. For a long time, we said they were $1.5 million to $2 million, and now they're about 3.4, average about 3.4 million for a basic roundabout, not a super big roundabout. All right, so I've given you a little bit of a background of sort of the state of just the cost of doing business of where we are. And let me say this too, Georgia is not unique in the cost of doing business. My counterparts around the nation, we sit around and talk about these very things about what the cost of doing business is. And then I kidded at the subcommittee meeting that I'm not an economist, but I play one at work sometimes. I think what my playing the economist says is that these costs are probably not going back to the way they used to be. They're sort of plateauing and somewhat leveling out. And the one thing about that National Highway Construction Cost Index slide is construction commodities and materials are a lot driven by the cost of a barrel of oil. So whatever, you sort of look to see what the barrel of oil is doing, and that has a direct correlation to what construction materials cost are. Because it just takes either fuel, energy, or obviously asphalt is a petroleum product to begin with. So that has a big influence on what that looks like. So the next slide is I guess what they call the money shot, their money slide, right? This is our revenue, amended 24 revenue, showing $1.56 billion ad. There was an increase in excise of $57.9 million, which is recognition of adjustments in interest earnings that comes from the Department of Revenue. The other thing I'll add as well, very importantly to note, is again, Governor Kemp did a great job, obviously, in making our budget whole based on the budget number while the excise tax was suspended when gas was so high. So our budget has been made full for that, plus recognizing a $57.9 million ad due to interest adjustments, fees, et cetera, from the Department of Revenue. So the $1.506 billion is the big ad, bringing our total state budget to $3.9 billion. And I really like saying that, by the way. That sounds really good. It's really close to 4. 4 might sound better, but 3.9 is fantastic. Our next slide, I like to summarize where these dollars are actually being utilized, okay? So we've got this from high to low, starting on the left side. Capital projects is a combination of several programs, 4 in fact. Capital construction, I'll talk more about it. Capital maintenance, I'll talk more about that. Local roads administration is a small little piece of the budget program to help local governments deliver federal projects. And then lastly is the new freight program that you've probably already heard about. The next biggest, and that constitutes about 63% of our total budget. The next biggest bar chart you see there is the routine maintenance budget. That is our staff and our contractors taking care of our roadsides and roadways. So that's where the bulk of the dollars go in that, about 13% of the state budget. Next is LMIG. You can see the next step down. That's the Local Maintenance Improvement Grant Program. You can see a $200 million ad there. I'll speak to that in a moment. And the other adjustment in that is recognition of the 10% of excise collections are dedicated to LMIG. So it had a 10% adjustment based on excise plus $200 million. Our general operations bucket, which is a pretty big bucket, but it includes many programs, including our general administration, data collections, planning, program delivery, the people that actually get the projects ready to deliver these projects, and traffic management, which has the technology, heroes, all the traffic operations kind of activities in that as well. You will see GO bond debt at $109 million. So we do have GO bond debt to be paid back. You see intermodal at $68.7 million. Payments to CERTA is mainly debt service that we owe, and the State Road and Tollway Authority holds our debt, being federal and or state debt, plus the GTIB program, which is the Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank, funded at $12.9 million. And a small little piece of that goes to the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority as well. And then lastly, you can see payments to the ATL at $13.1 million. On the next slide is a deep dive into the budget. I don't intend to go into a page turn here, deep dive into the budget with this committee, but let me just highlight that first circled is the capital construction budget. So capital construction is advancing and delivering the projects, be it right-of-way and construction, to deliver the capital program of projects. And that's where one of the big adds was. That was $659 million added into that capital construction budget, plus $8.5 million in motor fuel was added, for a total add of $667 million. And let me just explain why that number is so important. Part of that reason is for what I showed you to begin with just the cost of doing business has tremendously gone up. We have to work our projects being in a fiscally constrained manner each year. So when project costs go up and you're fiscally constrained, then you can't advance those projects. So what do? We move a project from one year into the next year. And it has a cascading effect, because if you only have $100 and you got $120 million of projects, or you got $100, you got $120 of projects, you got to move $20 into the future year. And so there's a cascading effect that goes on there. So just wanted to explain that, because again, the increased cost we've seen, we've continued to adjust our budgets and we refine our cost estimates monthly and annually. But quite honestly, when you got to be fiscally constrained at the federal level and the state level, then you just can't deliver the projects you thought you were going to deliver when you've got these kind of cost increases. There's one other complication that I share with you, and we're talking about the state budget, but remember, these dollars match the federal dollars as well. We have about $1.4 billion in federal that we have to match, and it's an 80-20 match. So one of the complications we have going on right now, I put this in the good news, bad news kind of category. The good news is our state budget is fantastic. Sort of the bad news right now is federally, federal government's in a continuing resolution to March 1st, which means we get only a daily pro rata share of our federal money. So federal money is basically authorized through Congress or through Appropriations Act. And so to give you some perspective of that, we have about $870 million of projects to bid between now and June. We have $168 million of federal money at our disposal. So we have, for March and April, we have $260 million of projects to let in front of us. We have about $200 million of right-of-way we need to federally authorize as well. So as you can do the math pretty quickly, we don't have enough federal funds to cover the projects that are federally funded and ready to go at the moment. So this causes some complications. We are allowed to basically pay it forward with the federal government. You can use state dollars, and when the federal dollars become available, they reimburse us back those federal share. But we've extended ourselves about as far as we can by paying the federal program forward. So what does this mean? It means that we're sort of slowing down our lettings, those monthly lettings, Mr. Chairman, as you pointed out. We're going to slow those down for this month and next month because of the federal uncertainty. The other complication is you have to go ahead.
Let's chase that rabbit, Chairman, Commissioner, just a little bit.
Yes, sir.
And that happening will cause what in July and August?
It causes projects to be shifted into later years, which cross the budget year, the state budget year,
Yeah.
which caused some accounting challenges on our side. And it's really not good to start stacking more and more projects up in those years too. We like to have more consistent level lettings month to month than hot spots and valleys, so to speak.
And I think, committee, that's one thing we're concerned with that Chairman Dolezal and I've talked about a lot is that, not only is this in construction, but in maintenance,
Yes, sir.
both. And so that's paving. And so, we'll talk about that probably at the very end, how that works out. But it's a concern for the industry and your communities that's going to be impacted by it.
And Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate you mentioning that. This is usually federally, we're sort of used to continuing resolutions that get you in from October into January. And we front load again, paying it forward, knowing that we'll get reimbursed with federal dollars and really don't have too much concern. But now that we've got a continuing resolution that puts us in March, and I don't have confidence, and I've asked for odds on from some people that, do you think that we'll get a full appropriations through the rest of the federal fiscal year? And I got no takers on that yet that's going to guarantee that. So we're just having to be a little slow and deliberate on the federal program. And let me make sure that's very clear. That's the federal. We have the money, and as recognized when the governor signs the amended budget, it puts us in a really good place. I will tell you, though, and I want to clarify this, out of the $667 million additional dollars recognized in our budget, it'll be darn hard to get that all out the door in state fiscal year 24 by June. Because, again, we have to advertise the project a month ahead of time, get bids, and award it. So some of this will carry over, which is fine. It's not a worry. But just know it takes a little bit of time for when you turn on the spigot for the water to run through the hose, so to speak. All righty. I've spent a lot of time on that slide. Let me get to some other great news. On the next slide is our local maintenance improvement grant. As I said, a $200 million add to that program, basically almost doubling that program from $218 million to $418 million. Local maintenance improvement grants, again, are formula distributed to every city and county applying for projects. We do this very efficiently, all online, whereas cities and counties just load their information up about what projects they're going to do, and we send them the dollars up front so they don't have to cash flow their projects. It's a great program, wildly successful, and this will absolutely go a long way for cities and counties to address their backlog of needs and to help with their resurfacing programs, to help with pipe and culvert repairs, bridge repairs. And so, again, just a wonderful add. And when you go looking at FY25, there's another $220 million in that. It's over $600 million in just 2 fiscal years that local governments will have at their disposal to advance their transportation needs across the state. So very, very important there. All right, next slide, Josh. Thank you. I was asked about the rail program. We have a small change and about the rail program, $2.3 million. On the next slide, I'll talk about what that does. The rail program comprises of a couple of things. As I talked about funding sources, we have state general funds, and we also have locomotive diesel funds. So recognizing Connor and Craig here from our class ones, they buy diesel, pay sales tax on diesel fuel for their locomotives as well as their short lines. Those dollars are collected and appropriated to our state rail program. So $8.3 million in our base budget for locomotive diesel is what that does. Now, what the add was state general funds for 3 things. One is we have the responsibility to have state safety oversight of MARTA's trains. And so the FTA, Federal Transit Administration, requires the states to have the state safety oversight, making sure things are operating safely. So we needed money in our rail budget for that duty that we have. There's $1 million of the $3 million that will match FRA money, Federal Railroad Administration money, to do a state rail plan. That's required federally that we do that every 5 years. And then the other part of that is we needed about $1.3 million for our staff to actually run this locomotive diesel tax program. And the bottom part of this slide, you can see we actually have a call for projects for both Class 1s and short line rail operators to apply to pull down that locomotive diesel tax funds. And I remind you that these are public dollars that would go to private entities. So there's the bar that we have to make sure that these are satisfying a public use. So, but anyway, very, very great program. Glad to have this at our disposal. But just a little bit about rail program. Next slide. Again, Mr. Chairman introduced this a minute ago. Routine maintenance. Just like the construction cost I showed you, our maintenance contracting cost continues to go up. Materials go up. So this add of about $34 million absolutely helps us in that. Just as a data point, back in fiscal year 2020, we outsourced or contracted for 238 contracts to do things like patching or sign repair, guardrail repair, things like that. The average cost per contract back in 2020 was $428,000. In 2023, we only could do 139 contracts, and the average cost was $620,000. Basically, almost a $200,000 increase on a per contract basis, and we did almost 100 less contracts just due to the increased cost, so your dollars just don't go as far. That's why we had this $34 million add there. And then traffic management. Let me talk about that budget program for a moment. Have you ever had assistance or had any of your constituents had assistance from our HERO program or our CHAMP program along the roadsides? One of the absolutely best programs we have. And so we have a small add of $3.4 million to do about 3 or 4 things in that program. One is to help with recruitment and retention of our heroes. In fact, we had a hero hit last night in the line of duty out here working on the interstate. He's okay, fortunately. He was treated and released. But just such a dangerous job trying to provide aid to our first responders, first and foremost, making sure that our police and state patrol and fire rescue people are safe, but also rendering aid to just stranded motorists that have a flat tire or need a little bit of gas to get to the next interchange. So we have some money there to work on recruitment and retention. We had to scale back our program last year because our HERO program fully staffed is 100 to 30-ish. We got down to 30 HERO operators. We just simply couldn't work 24/7 throughout the metro Atlanta area. So we scaled down our hours of operations from about 5 to 11:30 or so. I may be wrong about that. It may be midnight. But anyway, and we had to shrink it down. Now, we backfill that with our CHAMP program, which is outside of metro Atlanta, but we were able to contract and bring some people in. The good news is we've hired back to the low 80s right now. We've gone from 30 to 80, but we have to train those folks to make sure they're safe and that they know what the safety protocols are working on the roadway. But we've got to be able to, we're doing pretty good attracting, but we got to be able to retain them. So that's one thing. The other couple things are just the increased cost of our technology projects that we do, the cameras, the signs, the gadgets on the roadsides that provide data that you get on your phone. That's where all that data comes from. So we've got a lot of increased costs there. But I just wanted to mention that about HEROES. It's just an incredibly important program to this state, and we're very thankful to have this in the budget to help continue for that program to prosper and do much better than it was. All right, so let me go into the next slide and talk about transit. I had a question about the transit trust fund that comes from those rideshare fees. And then finally, I'll talk about the freight infrastructure project and a few other things. So let's flip to the next slide. Just a really quick, I know this transportation committee has been focused on transit across the entire state for many years now. Very excited to say that we have grown the transit coverage to 130 counties out of the 159 here in the great state of Georgia. GDOT's responsible for administering 5 Federal Transit Administration programs outside of the Metro Atlanta 13-county Atlanta Transit Link Authority boundary. So we administer the Federal Transit Administration grants to cities and counties. The ATL is responsible for, and is called the designated recipient of FTA dollars in the 13-county area. One of the things we're really excited about going back last budget year and in this budget year was creation of a program to help all those counties outside the 13-county Metro Atlanta area. And also these Transit Trust Fund dollars absolutely help the Atlanta Transit Link Authority boundary as well. But since our focus is outside of the Atlanta Transit Link Authority boundary, let me share what that is. We created a program, on the next slide, Josh. We created a program very much like the LMIG program, where cities or the transit operators can pull down additional funds if they're doing additional work, so to speak. These dollars are not supplanting their existing funds, but these dollars go to enhance their transit service that they provide. And you can see we based a formula on these percentages, that 55% of the money is based on population, that whatever that transit area serves, or that county serves, transit area, 55% of the dollars allocated go to just distribution on population served. Next, if a transit provider is serving multi-jurisdictional or multi-county, they're able to get 25% of the money as well. So we're encouraging transit operators not just to work in a city or a county, but to cross boundaries, because trips, usually if you got to go to the shopping, you go shopping, go to the doctor or whatever, city boundaries and county lines don't matter. You got to go where you got to go. So that's an incentive for more transit providers to be more efficient and effective by crossing boundaries. And then lastly is basically a formula of 20% of the money goes to the counties whose median household income is under $45,000 at the poverty level. So we wanted to make sure that the counties and the transit operators in the counties that are challenged economically have the ability to benefit from that, and because again it costs money to operate this, so hopefully that's a help. So this we've rolled this out. It's been wildly successful. Transit operators have really benefited from this, and we've got $24 out the door now. So just wanted to share with you great work that they've done. Out of the $23.6 million or so, 12.6 went to the ATL for their Atlanta Transit Link Authority. $11 million we've dispersed through this Transit Trust Fund program, and look forward to continuing this program. It's been a great success. Next slide is, again, I said the other slide was the money slide. I don't know, this is a home run slide, I guess I'd say. It's the new freight projects program that was recognized in the amended 24 budget for $641 million. Focused on freight infrastructure to provide funds for infrastructure projects that enhance economic development while promoting freight and logistics efficiency and safety across the state. I don't have to tell you, as this committee has studied freight for a very long time, going back to 2020 with a joint study committee and subsequent committees and work, and this committee's been totally focused on what freight means. At Eggs and Issues, you heard Chris Clark from the Chamber talk about 91% growth in tonnage of freight out to the year 2050. He is spot on with his data. It's amazing to see that. Just think about by 2050, which is almost equidistant to 1999. Think about that for a moment. We're in 2024. So when you look back, 1999 doesn't seem like that's a long time ago. So 2050 will be here before we know it. And basically freight tonnage is going to almost double on our roadways and rail. The cost of congestion back in 2015 was about $14 million a day to freight. Just being stuck in traffic and not moving, freight every day experienced a $14 million impact. If we play that out to 2050, it's over $33 million a day cost of doing business to freight. Not to us, not to commuters, but to freight, more than double. That's if we don't have a plan. That's why this $641 million is very important, because this gives us the ability to start that plan and get off to a great start of developing freight projects that will come forward, that will certainly continue. If it's a freight project existing, it may help accelerate that freight project, or it will start projects that we don't even have in our pipeline yet, the things that we know that needs to be done from these various studies that our planning director has done. And you saw on the slide there, you can see the various planning documents. Going back to the 2020 joint appropriations, we have the Coastal Empire study that studied Effingham, Bryan, Bullock, and Chatham counties in and around the port. We've got the overall statewide freight plan that the planning group has put together, a Troup County study. We got a little thing called Kia over in Troup County. We've got the Brazelton-Houston area study as well, where there's a lot of freight warehousing in the I-85 Jackson County, sort of Hall, Jackson, Banks County area. We've got the 365 study in Hall County, which the Georgia Inland Port that's under construction now is located. Lots of study, a lot of analysis. Now it's time to start putting projects on lists that gets us going. So this is a really exciting program to have at our disposal. The one thing I liked about this program in the budget, it did not say one-time funding for. So we know from the work of this committee how important our freight future is going to be, and look forward to having more discussion with you on that as we move forward. Next, just lastly, not lastly, but almost lastly, I was asked also about airport. They didn't see Chairman Smith asked about, hey, I didn't see airport aid in the amended budget. It stayed at $26.3 million, so there was no change in that. And he just asked previously, he asked for a look back at what had we previously been funding airport aid on an annual basis. So this chart reflects what the last few years of appropriations have looked like. And I kidded Vance Smith as well, asked him that he need a bigger parachute when he jumped out of the plane, because I heard he hurt his ankle by jumping out of the airplane. I told him he needed a better story, so that might have been why he was asking about airport aid. So, all right, let me close out with this slide for sure. I know this is the last one, is capital maintenance. Because, Mr. Chairman, you asked me a little bit about resurfacing. I showed you the cost of how much resurfacing had cost, and you sort of ask about, well, how many projects are we doing, how much, how far the dollar is going. And so this bar chart is a little bit complicated. The orange is how many projects we bid in each of the fiscal years. So the blue, sort of the biggest bar there, is how many centerline miles does that represent. So a centerline mile is just a mile. It doesn't matter how many lanes it is. It could be 5 lanes, it could be 2 lanes, but it's just centerline miles. And then last was what was our budget, or what the costs were. So you can see that we hit our stride in FY22 with over 1,000 miles of resurfacing. You can see in 23 we actually spent $489 million, almost $100 million more than the previous year, but only did 676 miles of paving. In FY24, you can see our budget's at $352 million. We've done 463 miles. Now we still have some projects in this fiscal year to go that are not reflected in the FY24 table, but it's not that many miles. So that just sort of gives you a basis of where we go. The 25 budget, which I did not talk about, does have $35 million more dollars added to the capital maintenance program. And up at the top of this slide, I remind you, capital maintenance is not just resurfacing. It's resurfacing, rehabilitation. Also, bridge maintenance falls out of the capital maintenance program, and as well as roadway striping. So restriping the roads come out of the capital maintenance. And of course, we try to leverage these state dollars with federal dollars as well. So what you see in these FY22, 23, 24 bar charts are federal and state combined. So that's the combined total. But I just wanted to share that with you, Mr. Chairman, since you asked sort of what that history looked like, and hopefully that's helpful to you. The last slide is my third last slide, I think, is my favorite quote, is the future is not something we enter, the future is something we create. So I'm thankful for this committee and our appropriations committees to give us a future that we can create, that we'll all be proud of as proud Georgians. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll entertain any questions or comments.
Well, thank you, Mr. Commissioner. for what y'all do. You know, I just had one comment. Someone asked me yesterday afternoon on my way to the State of Transportation. He said, "Well, Rick, 1.5 billion." He said, and this is really to Mr. Mollering, who we've talked about this many times. Can they do this work? I mean, and that was a good question from this gentleman. Didn't know a lot about what we do, and the answer is unequivocal. What, Mr. Mollering? Absolutely. And I know, Commissioner, you and I have talked about their bonding ability, and the capacity is within our current status with contractors that Mollering represents to be able to do this work, which
Yes,
I think is just a great thing. Just, it was a good question he asked me.
We have very competitive bidding environment, which is good. We average over 3 bids per project. The bigger projects have probably average 4 to 5 bids on the bigger projects. So we have great competition still, which brings value to Georgians because, again, it's competition. You got to win it, and you got to win it by having the best price. So and then to that point, we've looked back at the capabilities just at the contractors that won work in 23 to see what bonding capacity they had remaining after they won the work, and it was over $10 billion. So there's not a financial constraint there
That's great.
from a financial point of view.
Anybody have a button push question for Commissioner? Lauren?
Looking at being from Forsyth County and knowing the congressional dollars of how we send them to Washington, they come back and they're split around the 14 congressional districts. Is there any plan with this new money that's been added in the budget to put something, an aggressive plan to go to Forsyth County where we do have the infrastructure road issues that didn't pass T-Splice? So that's something that I wish we would have, but we didn't. Is there anything that y'all can, as DOT, put together to say y'all have got surplus money in Forsyth County, we'll match you 2 to 1, 3 to 1, even to have our local counties and invest in our projects? Because as you have a surplus in the state, I would think counties would have some surplus too.
Well, we always love to have a conversation with any county that's going to match us or do 2 to 3 to 1. The capital construction ad is for the existing project pipeline, which probably will keep projects in Forsyth County moving instead of cascading them back. And then the freight program certainly will be identified of what freight corridors that may exist. So, of course, up in your county, we're working very hard in State Route 20 and State Route 9. As a matter of fact, I think we bid the last section of State Route 9 or advertised it just this month. But State Route 20 is probably one of those freight projects that will rise to the top that otherwise would be delayed, that probably would come forward. As an example, not saying that was on the list, but maybe it is. And we're glad to always talk to the county. Yeah, absolutely. Your county's growing leaps and bounds for some reason.
Oh my goodness! It's excellent schools is why I think that'd be one. And
Funeral home. Good.
in great funeral homes. Okay. Oh well. Hey, but great. Well, thank you. I don't see any members have any questions, but I do. Just as the commissioner gets up, Josh gets his stuff. If you have questions, let's make sure we ask them because this is a dynamic, great industry we have, and I sure appreciate you guys working so hard on it. Okay, we're gonna keep moving. Zach Daniels coming up. We've got 25 minutes at the most for you to talk, and while you come up, I'm going to talk. In your folders, folks, you'll see 2 bills that we'll look at next week. House Bill 617, this is the one about the freight plan that we passed out of committee but didn't get it across crossover day. Take a look at it. Make sure you come up to me asking questions, and we'll discuss those. Also, Derek McCollum's bill from last year, 516, we had a little problem with it. There's some controversy, and we got that straightened out. We'll be voting on next week. Also, I'll be sending you the state freight plan you heard the commissioner talk about. We'll get that to you. Don't go to the next to the last page and look at $90 billion. But the planning director will be here next week to talk about it and kind of explain it to you. How's that? Well, y'all did quick. Didn't even see you do it.
Thank you, Mr.
Zach,
Chairman,
go
for
ahead.
having us today.
Thank
you to the committee members for all that y'all do for the state. I'm gonna let John Bozeman, who's with us as well, I'm gonna let him kind of start out by giving a little bit of a recap of the industry and some.
I know who you are, and so let's make sure we introduce ourselves
Okay.
and tell what your
I'm Zachary
role is.
Dayon with the Outdoor Advertising Association of Georgia. I've got Nick Brown, who's here with Lamar, and Jamie Godby, who's here with a member of ours, Whooping Creek Construction, who does some tree cutting. And John Bozeman with Freilich Bozeman Public Affairs, who's our lobbyist.
Thank you, Chairman. Zach, thank you. Just wanted to say we're going to try to be brief, but more interested in answering questions. Zach had asked me to just kind of give a quick recap of kind of where we are and what we've worked on since our vegetation bill passed a number of years ago. A number of y'all were very involved, and there was a very conscientious effort to bring some visibility to these signs to support these community businesses in a way that was listening to people that had the concerns and all. So I'd like to do that. And then, but first of all, you just had a great presentation from the commissioner and Josh Waller. They've been great partners for this industry. This is a very regulated industry. Our rules are codified, not just in state law, but there's a lot of federal laws and regulations. Anything process related, they've been a great partner in trying to find better ways to make the process easier. As you'll learn here today, there's a lot of cumbersome and very detailed processes we have to go to cut a tree so that people can see our sign, and it's well scripted. But things like relocation of billboards and construction projects, sound walls, barriers that get in the way of signs, having the ability to relocate it. The department has been a good sounding board, no pun intended, in working with us to be able to find solutions. And the legislature's been really supportive, recognizing there are reasonable solutions when people are trying to promote the community. Again, I've said I'll be brief, and I know Nick's going to hold me to that. But just briefly, a number of years ago, again, y'all were involved in giving us the right to have our signs seen under a number of conditions. It was about a 3-year negotiation, things like lowering the signs, having a very small viewing zone, paying a pretty complicated formula to the state for every tree that was removed for the right to be seen, and maintaining local government control. And as far as you can go on obscenity standards, those are all things that we all discuss when we're getting the right to be seen on private property through the state right of way. With that said, happy to answer any questions anyone has on that. It's pretty nuanced and detailed, but I think more importantly, Chairman, you were asking us, knowing that code's been on the books for a while, looking at things from a modernization standpoint, what are a few things the industry faces where the process could be better? And I think I'm going to hand it back over to Zach, unless there's any questions on the vegetation piece, to kind of start that dialogue for you.
So,
See no questions, so Zach, go ahead.
So first, I'd like to say thank you to GDOT for their help over the years and being responsive to some of our issues. But as John said, we're a heavily codified regulatory structure, and so the association tries to be as responsive as we can in times of emergencies. We run PSA messaging around the state that helps with state hiring and that kind of things from an association level. But on an industry level, I think what we're looking at is modernizing some of the code that's been around for a while. And that's what I have Nick and Jamie here for, is to talk about things like we have to wait. If you build a new billboard in the state of Georgia, you have to wait 5 years before you can cut the trees down around it. And if the trees are tall, then that means that you're restricted on what can be viewed, but you still have to pay the lease to the property owner. You still have to pay permitting fees. You have to wait until that 5 years is up to be able to cut. We also have to, once you cut the trees down around a sign, there's another permit, and I'm going to let Nick talk a little bit about this. There's another permit that you can get that's called a vegetation management permit, and that management permit is a little cumbersome. So Nick, I'll let you talk a little bit about that.
All right.
As Zach said, I'm Nick Brown, the general manager for Lamar Advertising in Atlanta. We're the largest operator in the state. We have 7 offices or plants around the state. We have over 3,000 permitted billboards with DOT, and we have about 125 employees in the state. So we have done, obviously, quite a bit of cutting. We figured out of the 3,000 permits, if we cut 1,000 locations, as Zach was referring to do an annual renewal, it's a 3-page document, basically, that lists the company and what you're going to do to it. Well, at 1,000 applications, you're talking about a ton of paper to push just to renew or just to go cut a board that you already cut. And most of the time it's a bush hog or a small cut, something that could be accomplished pretty quick. And to fill out that paperwork for that amount of for work it's cumbersome, and it's a lot of wasted paper, to be honest with you. As far as the 5-year wait, Zach explained that pretty well. Basically, if you build a new billboard, we can't do anything to it for 5 years. It doesn't really affect in Lamar's situation. I would say it doesn't really affect us as much. But as a smaller company, if you have a smaller company or an individual who doesn't have many billboards, that could affect them a bunch. If they build a billboard or choose to, and they can't do anything with it for 5 years, they're losing money. We're not necessarily doing that, but for a smaller company, it does affect them.
You heard me creak. You look, that's good. Just my question, if you don't mind. So that 5-year window, would that cause you to have to build a taller billboard than you would have if you didn't have that 5-year window? I remember during this discussion years ago, that was a big deal, height.
Yes, I would say, Mr. Chairman, in most situations, they would build over the trees. Now, there are some situations where someone, if they choose, could put a simple small board with a piece of plywood behind the trees and just let it sit for 5 years if they chose to. But most of the time, yes, you're correct. We would go over top of the trees, which would cause it to, you could be 125, 100, 150, whatever to get over the trees.
One of the other issues.
We just got a question.
Okay.
17.
Yeah, thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Holland.
Chairman. And thank you for your presentation. I'm just kind of curious. How much of it, what's the way in which you more customarily have to cut some of this vegetation down after 5 years? Do you have to use like an aerial saw, or is it, yeah, just curious.
My name's Jamie Gadby. I own Hoopin Creek Construction. We're located in Carroll County. I have 16 employees. We've been doing this since inception of the first bill, cutting throughout the state. We've probably done about 900 locations. So I have 2 pieces that are large on tracks, have to be moved with a low boy, so I'm excited about the new weight laws later coming on, I hope. But we moved a grinder, a shin grinder. It weighs 64,000 pounds. The track grinder is 104,000 pounds. And we go in with a cutter, fellow buncher, cuts trees off, lays them down, grinds them in place. There's rules as far as to how much chip matting can be left, how much regrassing. We've replaced $5 million worth of fence throughout the state in this process for the state of Georgia. Fences that were failing, not because of anything the state done, just because of trees falling on them. So there's been 35 miles of fence replaced by the billboard industry throughout the state.
So we'll stop. Did you get your answer? How'd they go about
More
it?
than my answer. That was good. Thank you.
Okay.
It started to sound like a National Geographic scene.
Okay. So,
Sorry,
now
sir.
I'll let you get back to your how you were going to do this.
Well, so thank you for the question, and that was kind of the next piece we were going to get to, is that when the vegetation legislation was originally passed, there was a lot of compromise in that and things that at the time, made a lot of sense. But in a post-COVID world, or just in a practical application sense, even before COVID, made it cumbersome and a little difficult. And I'm going to let Jamie talk a little bit about that here in a second. But some of those things are like, as an industry, we pay more to cut trees than what a tree would cost to be cut, even if it was in your front yard, or if Georgia Power was going to cut along a power line. We pay more for the tree than they do. One of the other things is that Our view zone is a I can't remember the term, but it's not a rectangle. It's a odd shape. So it's 250 feet along the fence. It's 350 feet along the road. And so in some cases that can mean that we leave a strip of trees that otherwise would have been cut along the right of way. And then the last piece of it is just the application size in and of itself to meet all of the criteria that's in the code. It's the application's quite a large application. You have to bond and you have to do some other things. So I'm gonna let Jamie talk a little bit about that.
The application itself is 28 pages. I have a arborist on staff and a surveyor. The arborist goes out and does a tree count in these 10 by 10 squares. Every tree has to be counted at waist height, 3 foot off the ground. Then a value is established based on a chart that was established back when the original bill was wrote. So the arborist gets that number. We compile the survey with that for the height, for the lowering, and then compile all the other documents that goes along. It's sent to the state, which Mr. McMurray's office does a fine job down at DOT helping us get these permits in place and where we can go cut. And we're thankful to them that they work with us well. But we once the arborist does that part and it's sent to the state along with the survey, they go out and inspect the site, make sure the staking's there, make sure it shows the cut, the 250 and the 350, and then it's sent back to the customer for a bond or a check to be held, cashier's check to be held in the DOT office until the work's complete. Then I meet with the area inspector on site. We do the cut, we regrass, refence, get everything exactly as required by the code, and then we meet with the inspector again. They sign off, and then it's sent back to Atlanta to be kept and held on file to what it looked like at the end of the cut. That's basically the process. That whole process, though, takes somewhere, anywhere from start to completion sometimes. Not anybody's fault in the process, but it can take 120, 130 days from the time you start this to actually the cut being complete and the billboard company being able to rent that site.
We have a question. Mr. McCollum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I had a question. I was just curious, would it streamline the process if you just paid like a square footage price or an acre price? Would that be simpler if we had something in place like that?
Yes, because I've seen contributory values be as high as $15,000. And if you were using market timber prices if a cruiser had went out and cruised this site and said, okay, this is what we'll give you on the stump, meaning after it's cut, the price would be less than $2,000. And if you think about the state side, you're dealing with usually a 40 by 700 is the most you're going to cut at any location. So you're at 28,000 square feet, which is half an acre approximately most of the time. So half an acre or less is what you deal with if you cut both view zones. So if you had a flat rate that's just $2,000 on every one, or whatever you could come up with that would be fair to the state and the citizens and fair to the billboard industry as well.
I'll add, I think one of the pieces that wasn't mentioned that would streamline is that when he mentions that they have to go out and measure every tree at height, every tree has to be marked and then it has to be photographed, and those photographs have to be sent in, and then that also has to be inspected by the site inspector from GDOT. So there's a lot of duplication in the process of ensuring that they're counted, and so to answer your question, yeah, that would simplify it quite a bit from the industry's point of view, which, again, for Nick isn't maybe that big of a deal, but for someone that owns 1 or 2 billboards in the state, 120, 130 days is a big impediment.
I think that's something you need to define, Zach, it's not all Lamar. It's not all out front. It's not all Clear Channel. It's how many of your members they're out there that are 5, 10?
A lot. So there's almost 10,000 permitted billboards on state routes in the state. 3,000 of them are owned by Lamar. 2,000 of them are owned by Clear Channel and Outfront. So that leaves 4,000 or 5,000 boards that are owned by companies that own 100 or fewer boards, and a large share of them are people that own 3 or less. And so in our association, we have 4 large members, but we have 56 members that are 10 or fewer.
Okay, great. I'm glad we brought that up. Mrs. Newlitz, do you have a question?
Yes, I know years ago, like 20 years ago, there was a different set of regulations in Macon Bibb around that area because of hardwoods and beautification projects. Are those restrictions still in place, or is it pretty much uniform statewide?
The restrictions that are in place are statutorily in place statewide. There are restrictions on like historic trees of a certain age, but other than that, I'm not aware. Zach, you may be able to answer whether Macon Bibb or maybe the Columbus area has anything. I'm not aware.
I'm not aware, but there's, right.
But there is a provision in the code that says we can't do anything that's counter to local control. So if there are local rules there, then that may be what you're referring to.
And on the historic trees and things, you know, we would support leaving that type of language in place if there ever was a discussion. It's 75 years. Anything over 75 years of age. However, those trees, and I think Jamie was going to speak to this, trees on the right-of-way over the age of 75 don't exist because when they originally built the interstate system, they clear-cut fence line to fence line. So we're within about 10 years that if a tree started growing the day after they cut, it would meet that qualification, but they don't. Under this code section, they don't exist.
Sure. Anything else? You want to add to it? Go ahead. Go ahead. Just let me give immediately recognize first. Mr. Floor Leader.
Oh, this is, Devin had leaned over and asked me this. Being he runs Metro Ambulance, do y'all have any double signs together?
What do you mean?
Well, there's so many lawyer signs out there. He wanted to have one, an ambulance chasing a lawyer rather than a lawyer chasing an ambulance. That was for Devin.
Let's see. I can't. I'm just going to say something, just one interesting. I forget your name again.
Jamie.
Jamie.
Yes, sir.
Well, we have to say we do have a common friend,
Yes, we
Mr. Rowland.
Don Rowland.
Don Rowland lives in Jasper, and your relationship to Mr. Rowland is through.
Racing, and I owned a billboard on his property at one time.
Oh, okay, but you're there. Mr. Rowland is a dirt track racer
That's correct.
in Jasper, and you are too.
And yes, sir.
And you own dirt track
In Alabama, yes, sir.
in Alabama. We had to make sure we said Don Rowland's name here because I'm sure we'll send that, and we'll have to get a picture to send to Mr. Rowland. Great entrepreneur in our community. His boys, hardworking,
Smart man.
hardworking group of people, and for that, let me just pause just 1 second. I know we're gonna. So we had a question from somebody in our audience, which we're not going to answer at this moment. Sorry about that, because we're not doing that because we've got to go, and we've got session starting in 10 minutes. Appreciate you guys bringing this forward. I know it's something we talked about a little bit. I think it's important to note how many small folks that you have, and I know you're around the building a lot. Any members who have any questions or thoughts of, if you want to help them, you just talk to them. You know, we're always open to help our small businesses throughout the state.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing us
Thank
to
you.
come.
Thank you, sir.
And our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.